Hey everybody, welcome back to the results reveal video for my video I did last week, which was the Neural DSP Soldano SLO-100 plugin that was recently released versus the Line 6 Helix version of that same amp model. So, quick rundown. I've been doing these videos for a while, doing blind tests, seeing who can pick out if they think one amp is the other, and also which one folks prefer. Now, I've used a lot of different methodologies. Some of them I have been very scientific, using the same IR, not really paying attention to the settings on each amp, but just trying to get them to sound as close as possible, which is usually a fairly difficult thing to do since there's so many variables involved. I've done them in comparing them to real amps. I've done them in comparing them with their internal cabs. This time I used, as I mentioned in the first video leading up to this, I use a completely different methodology that I don't usually do, and I don't usually find it works because of all these different variables. But what I actually did is I went to each plugin and I made all the identical settings from bass, middle, treble, and so on and so forth. And I used an IR that I really like from the fine folks at Ownhammer, and I used the same IR. I didn't really set out planning to do it this way, but I just checked it as I was messing around with it, and I was actually really impressed with how close it sounded by just running all the settings the same, and I thought it would make for a very interesting episode of just how good is the Line 6 Helix. I'm going to dive into that a little bit more in a moment. Just for more of the backstory about what this test was all about, I'll link below to the original video, and if you want to go listen to that before you hear the results, you can go do that, because I'm going to, spoiler alert, I'm going to give the results in just a second here. But let's do that. Let's jump right over to the results and see what happened with folks guessing which one they thought was the Helix and which one they preferred. And then we'll dive in. I'll show you my Cubase project and show you exactly the settings, and we'll take a little listen back and forth between them. So first things first, we want to know which one was which. So in this case, Tone A was the Neural DSP Soldano plugin, and Tone B was Helix Native's version of that. Now, as far as folks guessing which was which, fairly even again, and a fair number of folks got it correct. 40 people thought that Helix was Tone A, and 33 thought Helix was Tone B. Now, as far as preference goes, this was kind of surprising. 18 people preferred Tone A, which was the Neural DSP plugin, and 31 people preferred Tone B. Now, we have to take those results with a bit of a grain of salt. As I've already mentioned, I didn't try to get the gain to be exactly the same. Some folks said they felt that Tone B had slightly more gain. Very well could have. We'll listen again in a second, because I was just going with the numbers on the dial. So there could have been an unfair advantage given to one over the other, simply like I showed in one of my previous tests with the Marshall examples with the Helix versus the Iridium. When the Iridium was dialed in with much more gain, almost everybody preferred it just because it suited that particular situation. So that's why we always have to take these kind of results with a grain of salt. And this doesn't by any means mean that, oh, the Helix blew it away, because we would have to really carefully dial it in so that those sound, as close as we could possibly get them. And I've said many times, and a lot of other folks have hinted to that too, that at this point, does it really matter? With a couple tweaks on either of these that we were dealing with this time, I think these results could have been skewed either way, and both sounded really good. I mean, for me, we already have this built into the Helix. No extra charge. The Neural plugin is, a little bit of money. So, I don't know, for me, I still kind of always go back to the Helix. I don't even try to hide it. I mean, that's why I use the Helix. It's not, as some folks have alluded, Line 6 must be paying you. And, I've never received a dime from Line 6. I use Line 6 Helix because I love the Line 6 Helix. And I bought a Line 6 Helix to use, and I got rid of other things, to fund that purchase, and I've never looked back since. I love it so much. Again, though, so many other modelers are so good as well. I am not being paid by anybody to do any videos or to say any of these things. So, very interesting stuff. Let's go over to Cubase. So here's my Cubase project, and what you'll see here, my methodology was I plugged my guitar straight into the instrument input of my IK Multimedia Axe I/O interface, all set to flat. No little fancy bells and whistles there. I recorded this cheesy little guitar riff, and I just duplicated the track, as you'll see here, right? I guess I labeled the first one Guitar Helix 05, but this is just the DI'd track. Now, let me just shut off the plugin here for a second, and this is what the basic DI track sounds like. as we would expect, kind of a dry, lifeless, de-eyed guitar track. But that's the exact same thing on both to keep things as fair as possible. Now, let's pull up the Soldano plugin, and let's also pull up the Helix native plugin. All right, so here we have both. Now, if you notice, first and foremost, the IR I used was an Ownhammer 412 MRBW M71-GNR balanced. I really enjoy that IR, and as you'll see here, I'm using the same IR on Helix native. Now, as far as the settings go, if we look here at the amp settings, I have nothing on the input. I don't have the graphic EQ engaged on the Soldano. I don't have anything after the fact. I just have the amp on as such. And the settings are, I'm on the overdrive channel, or the heaviest gain channel, let's say, with the preamp overdrive on 3, bass, middle, and treble on 5, the overdrive master on 6, presence on 5. Now, the one thing I did do here, the depth control is not a control we have on Helix native. And what I found just by turning it down to 0, it gave me as close to the results of Helix native as I could. Anything that the depth control does add, I feel could just be added in very easily in Helix native by adding an EQ after the fact, and you're going to get there if you wanted that, that if you wanted to use that, something like that depth control. So coming over to Helix native, overdrive on 3, bass, middle, and treble on 5, presence on 5, overdrive master on 6, as we see here. Channel volume's not going to affect the tone, just the overall output. Now, I did not play with the deeper functions. Those are the stock settings that come up. Again, could I have even got this closer by messing around with those deeper functions? Absolutely possible, right? That's the thing. There's so many variables here, and that's why it's so hard to get these things to be exactly the same, or to even say that one is better than the other, right? But here we have it. So here's the Soldano track, and what you'll see is as I solo the Helix track, it'll go between the unmuted unmuted Neural track, and the Helix track. So let's take a listen to this. All right, what'd you guys think? I mean, there are differences, obviously. Some folks commented that they felt Tone B, which was the Helix, had a slight bit more gain. Does kind of sound like it. I didn't try to balance that off. Like I said, I just went with the settings, and I thought that would be a really interesting experiment. I'm really surprised how close they came. But, I might even lean towards saying the reason so many more folks preferred the Helix is maybe it did have a touch more gain. Now, a couple folks mentioned to me that they thought Tone B was louder. When I went and did a statistical analysis on each of the exported tracks, the RMS value for Tone B was 0.5 dB louder, and on the LUFS loudness meter, it was 0.4 dB louder. I mean, I guess we could argue about that. That's well within that sort of 1 dB threshold that the human ear is going to be really perceive. Could it have given a slight advantage to the Helix tone? Maybe. It's actually quite difficult to get the RMS or LUFS values much closer than that anyways. And that's just how it turned out after I matched them on my meters in Cubase for the export, and then I did the statistical analysis. So I felt that was kind of within range. But anyways, again, nothing saying that this is a scientific thing that's proving anything anyway. So, pretty interesting though. Hats off to the folks at Neural for making a great plugin, but for us folks that have the Helix, I don't know if I would feel any great need to rush over to it. One thing I wanted to mention though, and the funny thing is, and I've heard comments to allude to this, when you pull the Neural plugin up, it's beautiful looking. It really is a nice looking plugin. It looks, the graphics look very much like the real amp. amp, those types of things can play tricks with us and give us this idea that, wow, this must be better because look how great it looks. You know, other companies like Universal Audio and many other companies will make these graphical user interfaces that look like the real deal, very, you know, kind of shiny and beautiful looking. And a lot of times, I mean, that's done for a reason. It can really sway us to believe that that must sound better. Hey, that's got the Soldano name on it, right? It's got to be better. It's got to be a real Soldano. It looks like the real Soldano. We pull up a little block in the Helix with the same red sliders that we see on every other amp model. We go, yeah, okay, maybe it sounds like a Soldano, right? So it's an interesting point to keep in mind that these blind tests are always valuable if done correctly. And I'm not saying that this one was some sort of, you know, set some sort of scientific standard that should be followed, because it really didn't. I did it in kind of an unscientific way. But I just wanted to put it out because I found the results were actually quite interesting. But we do have to do those blind tests to get rid of, you know, sort of the eye candy that could maybe sway us to feel that one thing is better than the other. Just some food for thought, in my opinion, on that matter. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. I'll be back soon with some more. Please like the video, share it with anybody who you think would like to see the results or like to just listen through the first video before seeing this and then know what the results are. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell notification, get notified when I put new content out. I'll be back really soon with some more content. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Ciao for now.